The cowboy's hand froze over the courtroom bench when the younger boy stood up and said 5 words nobody expected to hear. Snowmelt dripped from the courthouse roof outside, while a chair scraped sharply across the wooden floor. The younger boy's fingers trembled against the bench. Across the room, a wealthy woman lowered her gaze for the first time all morning. Beside her, the cowboy sat perfectly still, his knuckles white. Then the boy drew a breath and opened his mouth. What he said next would force everyone in that room to choose a side. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from and join us for more unforgettable frontier stories. The bell above the schoolhouse door rang one last time on a gray December afternoon. Vivian Carter stood alone between rows of empty desks. A thin layer of snow pressed against the windows, and the wind coming down from the Absaroka Mountains rattled the glass hard enough to make the old building groan. Only 5 children had come that morning. 5. Not long ago there had been 23. Families had followed work elsewhere. Some headed toward railroad towns. Others packed their wagons and disappeared west across the prairie. Stone Creek was shrinking one winter at a time. The chalk still rested in Vivian's hand when the final student left. "Goodbye, Miss Carter." A small voice. Then silence. She watched the child hurry across the street toward a wagon waiting in the snow. The room felt larger after that. Too large. An hour later, 3 members of the town council sat in the front row of desks. No one looked comfortable. Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat. "The school will close after today." Vivian nodded before he finished speaking. She had known. Everyone had. The councilmen shifted in their seats. One stared at the floor. Another studied his hat. "We're sorry," Mr. Abernathy said quietly. "There just aren't enough students anymore." Vivian placed the chalk on the tray. "I understand." No tears. No argument. That somehow made the men even more uncomfortable. When they left, she began packing her books. Arithmetic. History. A worn copy of Shakespeare. A collection of children's stories with a torn blue cover. Outside, snow drifted across Main Street. Inside, the schoolhouse slowly became a memory. By sunset, she carried the final box upstairs to the small room she rented above Miller's General Store. The landlord had already spoken to her that morning. Rent was due next week. Without a salary, he could not hold the room. He had been kind about it. Kindness changed nothing. The room contained little enough. A narrow bed, a washstand, a small stove, a trunk at the foot of the bed. Everything she owned could fit inside it. Vivian folded her dresses carefully. One for church, one for work, one patched twice at the elbows. The knock came just after dark, firm, deliberate, not the landlord, not a neighbor. She opened the door. A tall man stood beneath the hallway lamp. Snow clung to the shoulders of his coat. The brim of his hat cast a shadow across sharp features weathered by years outdoors. Vivian recognized him immediately. Everyone in Wyoming Territory knew Cole Weston, owner of Eagle Ridge Ranch, widower, cattleman, a man whose name carried weight from Cody to Cheyenne. "Miss Carter," he said. His voice was low and steady. "What can I do for you, Mr. Weston?" He glanced past her at the packed trunk, then back at her. "I heard about the school." News traveled fast in Stone Creek. "It did not take long," she said. "No." The wind rattled the building. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Cole removed his gloves. "My sons need someone." Vivian frowned. "I beg your pardon?" "My sons need a woman who won't quit on them." The words landed strangely. Not rude, not gentle. Simply direct. He continued, "And you need a home." Vivian stared at him. Of all the things she expected to hear, that was not one of them. You came here to offer charity? His expression never changed. No. Then what exactly are you offering? Marriage. The hallway fell silent. Even the wind seemed farther away. Vivian searched his face for humor. Found none. You don't know me. I know enough. You aren't in love with me. No. The honesty struck harder than any pretty lie could have. Vivian folded her arms. And you expect me to say yes? I expect nothing. Cole's gaze remained steady. You can refuse. She looked at the trunk, the empty room, the future waiting beyond Sunday. Cold, uncertain, alone. I'll think about it. Cole nodded once. That's all I ask. He turned and walked away. His boots echoed down the hallway until the sound disappeared. That night, Vivian barely slept. The stove burned low. The wind slipped through gaps in the wall. At dawn, she opened her purse. $3.40. That was all. By sunrise, her decision had already been made. The next morning, she climbed into Cole Weston's wagon. Snow covered Main Street. Storekeepers swept their porches. A pair of women stood outside the bakery watching her leave. As the wagon rolled past, their voices drifted through the cold air. Poor thing. The second woman shook her head. He ran off 3 women from that ranch in 2 years. Vivian looked forward, toward the mountains, toward Eagle Ridge, toward a future she could not see. The horses pulled the wagon onto the snowy road. Stone Creek slowly disappeared behind them. For most of the morning, neither Vivian nor Cole spoke much. The road climbed gradually into higher country. Snow covered the sagebrush. Pine trees stood dark against white hillsides. Every so often they passed a fence line half buried beneath drifts. Vivian kept her gloves folded in her lap. The wagon wheels creaked. The leather harnesses groaned softly. Once Cole handed her a tin cup of coffee from a thermos tucked beneath the seat. She accepted it with a quiet thank you. He nodded. Nothing more. The mountains grew larger as the day went on. By late afternoon, Eagle Ridge Ranch appeared through the falling snow. Vivian had never seen anything quite like it. The main house sat on a rise overlooking miles of winter pasture. Smoke drifted from 2 stone chimneys. A large red barn stood beyond it. Corrals stretched across the valley floor. Cowboys moved between buildings like dark figures against the snow. The place felt less like a ranch and more like a small town. As the wagon rolled through the main gate, Vivian noticed the sign hanging above it. Eagle Ridge Ranch. The paint was worn from years of Wyoming wind. Several ranch hands stopped working long enough to watch her arrive. Not hostile, not welcoming, simply curious. Cole climbed down first, then offered his hand. Vivian hesitated for only a second before taking it. His grip was steady, warm despite the cold. The front door opened. An older woman stepped out onto the porch, gray hair pinned neatly beneath a bonnet, sharp eyes, straight posture. "You're late," she said. "The road was bad," Cole replied. The woman looked at Vivian, looked her over carefully, not rudely, but thoroughly. "This is Martha Griggs." Cole removed his hat. "Martha keeps this place running." Martha gave a small nod. "I've been doing it longer than you've been alive." Vivian almost smiled. "Nice to meet you." "We'll see." That was all Martha said. Inside, the house smelled of wood smoke, coffee, and fresh bread. The front room was large but practical. Nothing fancy. Heavy furniture, worn rugs, family photographs on the walls. A life lived rather than displayed. The sound of boots came from the hallway. 2 boys appeared. The older one stood straight immediately. The younger remained half hidden behind him. Cole glanced toward them. Owen, Noah. Neither boy spoke. "This is Miss Carter." Owen crossed his arms. He had his father's eyes, the same stubborn look. Noah looked down at the floorboards. Quiet. Watchful. After a moment, Cole added something that made both boys stiffen. "She'll be living here." Silence. Heavy silence. Owen's jaw tightened. "Why?" "Because I said so." That answer satisfied no one, especially Owen. His eyes moved to Vivian, then away again. Without another word, he turned and walked out the back door. Noah followed. The door slammed behind them. Martha sighed. That went better than expected. Vivian wasn't sure if she was joking. The first few days were difficult, harder than she expected. Every morning she tried to establish some kind of routine. Every morning Owen found a new way to challenge it. One day he disappeared before breakfast. The next he left muddy boots across a freshly cleaned floor. Another morning he opened a corral gate and allowed 3 horses to wander halfway across the property. When Vivian found him leaning against a fence post afterward, she expected an argument. Instead, she handed him a hammer. "The north fence needs repair." He frowned. "What?" "The board is broken." "So?" "So we're fixing it." "You can't make me." Vivian looked toward the damaged fence, then back at him. "No." "But the fence still needs fixing." She started walking. After several seconds, Owen followed. Neither mentioned it again. By sunset, they had repaired 6 sections together. Neither called it progress. But it was. Noah was different. He rarely caused trouble. Instead, he seemed to disappear into corners of the house, at meals, in the barn, during church, always watching, always quiet. Then one night the wind came screaming down from the mountains. Snow hammered against the windows. The ranch house creaked beneath the storm. Around midnight, Vivian heard footsteps in the hallway. Small footsteps. She opened her bedroom door. Noah stood there clutching a blanket. His face was pale. "You all right?" she asked gently. The boy nodded, then shook his head. Vivian sat beside him in the kitchen near the stove. She poured warm milk into a mug. The clock ticked quietly on the wall. Outside, snow rattled against the glass. "Bad dream?" she asked. Noah stared into the milk. After a long pause, he nodded. Vivian didn't press him. Instead, she began telling him a story she used to tell her students. A simple story about a traveler crossing mountains. Nothing special, just enough to fill the silence. The boy listened. Eventually, his eyes began to droop. His breathing slowed. When Vivian looked up, she noticed someone standing at the far end of the hallway. "Cole." He said nothing, only watched for a moment, then gave the smallest nod before disappearing upstairs. The next morning, he left a fresh cup of coffee beside her place at breakfast. No explanation, no words, just coffee. It was the first sign that something had shifted, only slightly, but enough to notice. A week later, Vivian was helping organize supplies in the stable loft when she noticed an old wooden box hidden behind several feed sacks. Dust covered the lid. Curious, she pulled it free. The hinges creaked. Inside lay a bundle of yellowed papers tied with faded blue ribbon. At the top sat a single envelope. The handwriting was delicate, careful. Written across the front were 4 simple words. "For my husband." Vivian stared. The seal remained unbroken. The letter had never been opened, and somehow she knew exactly who had written it. Below the loft, horses shifted in their stalls. Outside, snow drifted across Eagle Ridge Ranch. Vivian slowly turned the envelope over in her hands. For the first time since arriving, she realized there were things in this house no one wanted to talk about, and some of them were still waiting to be opened. Vivian carried the letter back to the house carefully, as if the paper itself might break. The envelope rested on the kitchen table through supper. No one mentioned it. Cole drank his coffee. Owen pushed potatoes around his plate. Noah listened to the wind outside. The letter remained between them. Finally, after the boys had gone upstairs, Vivian slid it across the table. "I found this in the stable loft." Cole looked down. The color left his face so quickly, she almost missed it. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he picked up the envelope. His thumb traced the handwriting. "For my husband." The room grew very still. Vivian thought he might finally open it. Instead, he stood, walked to the stove, and tossed the unopened letter into the fire. The paper curled almost instantly. Orange flames swallowed the edges. Vivian rose from her chair. "What are you doing?" Cole stared into the fire. "Leaving it where it belongs." His voice was flat, controlled. Too controlled. It was her last letter. "It doesn't matter." "Of course it matters." The words escaped before she could stop them. For the first time since she had arrived at Eagle Ridge, Cole looked angry. Not loud, not explosive, just wounded. "You don't know what you're talking about." Then he walked out into the darkness. The door shut behind him. The next few days passed beneath a layer of silence. Breakfasts became shorter. Conversations disappeared. The boys noticed. Even Martha noticed. Nobody said anything. Then the weather changed. Old ranchers claimed they could smell a hard storm coming. By Thursday afternoon, the sky had turned the color of iron. Wind rolled down from the mountains. Snow began before sunset. By midnight, it was falling sideways. The blizzard hit the Absaroka Range with a force people would talk about for years. The next morning, several riders arrived with urgent news. Part of the western herd had become trapped near Red Rock Canyon. Cole gathered every available hand. Extra ropes, feed sacks, cold weather blankets. By noon, they rode out. Vivian watched from the porch. Snow already covered the horses' tracks before the men disappeared from sight. One day passed, then another, then a third. No word, no riders, no messages, nothing. Late on the third evening, a ranch hand finally returned. His horse stumbled into the yard, nearly exhausted. "We got separated," he said. "Storm got worse near the canyon." The fear that settled over the ranch afterward was impossible to ignore. That night, nobody slept much. Around midnight, Vivian heard movement downstairs. A door opening quietly, then closing. She wrapped a coat around her shoulders and hurried outside. Fresh tracks led away from the barn. Small tracks. Not a grown man. A boy. Owen. The realization hit instantly. He had gone looking for his father. Vivian saddled the nearest horse herself. The stable lantern swung wildly overhead. Snow stung her face the moment she rode beyond the yard. The storm had weakened, but not disappeared. Dark clouds still covered the moon. She found Owen nearly an hour later. The boy sat beside his horse beneath a cluster of pines. His cheeks were red from cold. His jaw was set stubbornly. "I'm finding him. I know. You can't stop me. No." She pulled her horse alongside his. "But you're not going alone." For a moment, he looked ready to argue. Instead, he looked away. Together, they continued toward the canyon. Near dawn, they found Cole. His horse had fallen on a rocky slope. He sat beneath a sandstone ledge with a blanket wrapped around one shoulder. Tired, cold, injured, but alive. The relief on Owen's face arrived before he could hide it. The three of them reached an abandoned hunter's cabin before the next wave of snow arrived. Inside, a small stove stood in the corner. Dust covered the shelves. Wind rattled loose boards overhead. For the first time in days, they were safe. Cole sat near the stove while Vivian cleaned a cut above his eyebrow. Neither spoke much. The fire crackled softly. Outside, snow drifted against the walls. Finally, Cole stared into the flames and spoke. "The night my wife died." His voice almost disappeared. Owen looked up. Vivian remained still. We argued. The words hung in the room, over nothing important. He swallowed. At least it seemed unimportant then. The fire popped. A spark floated upward. When she left the house that night, I let her go angry. Nobody interrupted. I never got the chance to take it back. His eyes remained fixed on the flames. That's why I never opened the letter. The confession seemed heavier than the storm outside. For years, he had carried it alone. Vivian said nothing, only placed another piece of wood onto the fire. Sometimes, silence was the kindest thing a person could offer. The storm finally eased the following morning. Together, they rode back toward Eagle Ridge Ranch. The mountains glittered beneath fresh snow. For the first time in days, the sky was clear. But when the ranch came into view, something immediately felt wrong. A stranger stood beside the front gate, a tall man in a black overcoat, a leather document case tucked beneath one arm. He waited without moving, as if he had all the time in the world. When the riders approached, the man removed a folded packet of legal papers. "Mr. Weston?" Cole's expression hardened instantly. "Who are you?" The stranger tipped his hat. Victor Langford. The name meant nothing to Vivian. Not yet. But the look on Cole's face told her it should. "I represent Mrs. Eleanor Pierce of Denver." The wind moved softly through the ranch yard. Victor handed over the documents. Cole unfolded them, read the first page, then the second. The color drained from his face, and for the first time since Vivian had met him, he looked genuinely afraid. The ranch yard seemed to fall silent. Even the horses near the corral stopped moving for a moment. Victor Langford waited patiently while snow drifted across the shoulders of his black coat. Cole lowered the papers. "What does she want?" Victor adjusted his gloves. "You already know the answer." "No." Victor's expression remained professional. "Mrs. Eleanor Pierce believes her nephews should be raised by family." Owen stepped closer to his father. Noah moved quietly toward Vivian. Neither boy spoke. Victor opened his leather case and removed another document. "The petition will be filed in Cody." Cole folded the papers sharply. "We'll discuss it through attorneys." Victor nodded. "That would be wise." Then he returned to his horse and rode away. No one moved until he disappeared beyond the gate. That evening, supper was unusually quiet. The storm had passed, but another kind of weather had settled over Eagle Ridge Ranch. Martha served beef stew. Nobody seemed hungry. Finally, Owen pushed his bowl away. "She's not taking us." The statement sounded more like a plea. Cole rubbed a hand across his forehead. "No one is taking anyone tonight." "Then why is she trying?" Cole stared at the table. The answer never came. 3 days later, Eleanor Pierce arrived herself. Her carriage rolled into the ranch yard shortly before noon. The vehicle looked expensive even beneath a layer of road dust. 2 chestnut horses pulled it. A driver sat straight despite the cold. When the door opened, a tall woman stepped down. She wore a dark green traveling coat trimmed with fur. Everything about her appeared polished, controlled, intentional. Vivian noticed the resemblance immediately. The same eyes as the boy's late mother. The same shape of the face. Only harder somehow. Eleanor climbed the porch steps without hesitation. Cole. Her voice carried years of unfinished history. Cole removed his hat. Eleanor. Neither smiled. Neither offered a handshake. The air between them felt old, older than anyone present. Eleanor's gaze shifted toward the boys. For a brief moment her expression softened. Then her eyes landed on Vivian. The softness disappeared. So this is Mrs. Weston. The words sounded polite. The tone did not. Vivian stood calmly. Vivian Weston. Eleanor offered a small nod. Nothing more. That afternoon, rumors spread through Stone Creek faster than wildfire. At Miller's General Store, at the church, at the winter cattle market. People talked. They always did. Some claimed Eleanor owned property in Denver. Others said she had powerful friends. By the end of the week, the gossip had become uglier. Vivian heard it herself while purchasing flour in town. Two women stopped talking when she entered. A rancher lowered his voice near the coffee barrel. Everyone seemed to have an opinion. Very few knew the truth. Back at Eagle Ridge, other problems appeared. Two hired hands quit. A supplier demanded payment sooner than expected. The bank in Cody sent a letter regarding storm losses. Cole spent long evenings alone in his study reviewing account books. The lines around his eyes deepened. The ranch was hurting. Not ruined, but hurting. One night Vivian found him sitting beside a lamp long after midnight. Receipts and ledgers covered the desk. A cold cup of coffee sat untouched beside his elbow. You should sleep. Cole gave a tired laugh. That's becoming difficult. Vivian placed a fresh cup beside him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he looked up. You don't have to stay through this. She met his eyes. I know. Another silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just honest. I meant what I said before, she added. About what? Not giving up. Something moved across his face. A flicker of gratitude. Gone almost instantly. The real surprise came from Owen. A few days later, after church, a boy from town made a careless remark about Vivian within earshot. Before anyone else could react, Owen stepped forward. Don't talk about her like that. The churchyard went quiet. The other boy backed away. Owen returned to the wagon without another word. Vivian watched him climb inside. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. That evening, Noah delivered a second surprise. Eleanor had stopped by the ranch house for supper. She attempted conversation, asked about school, about books, about Denver. Finally, she smiled and said, You can call me Aunt Eleanor, you know. Noah looked down at his plate, then shook his head. No. The single word landed harder than shouting. Eleanor's smile faded. The room fell silent. For the first time, the boys had chosen a side. A week later, Eleanor made her final move. The entire family gathered in the front room. Snow drifted beyond the windows. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace. Victor Langford stood beside Eleanor, holding several legal documents. The hearing has been scheduled, he announced. Cody, 3 weeks from today. Nobody spoke. Eleanor folded her hands neatly in her lap. Then she looked directly at Vivian. There is something you deserve to know. Cole's jaw tightened immediately. Eleanor. No. She should hear it. Her eyes never left Vivian. I intended to marry Cole once. The confession stunned the room. Even Victor looked uncomfortable. Eleanor continued quietly. That was before my sister entered the picture. Cole stood. That's enough. But Eleanor wasn't finished. I lost more than a sister when she died. The years of bitterness beneath her polished appearance finally surfaced. Not loudly, not dramatically, just long enough for everyone to see it. Then she rose and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she paused. The court will decide what happens next. The front door closed behind her. Wind rattled the windows. Noah moved closer to Vivian. Owen stared into the fire. Cole remained standing, motionless. 3 weeks. That was all the time they had. And if the hearing went badly, Cole could lose his sons, the ranch, and everything they had begun to build together. For the next 3 weeks, that thought seemed to follow everyone at Eagle Ridge. It followed Cole into the barns before sunrise. It followed Vivian through the kitchen, the school books, the laundry room, and every quiet corner of the house. It followed Owen and Noah even when they pretended not to notice. The hearing in Cody arrived beneath a clear spring sky. Snow still lingered on distant mountain peaks, but the roads had finally opened. The courthouse stood near the center of town, a sturdy brick building facing the main street. Wagons lined the road outside. Men gathered near the hitching posts. Inside, the room felt smaller than it should have. Eleanor Pierce sat beside Victor Langford and another attorney from Denver. She looked confident, prepared, certain. Cole sat beside Vivian. Neither spoke much. Occasionally, their hands brushed against the wooden bench. Neither moved away. When the hearing began, Eleanor's attorney painted a careful picture. A struggling ranch, a widower burdened by debt, a marriage arranged out of necessity, a future that would supposedly be better in Denver. Witnesses spoke. Bank records were discussed. Storm losses were reviewed. Every weakness Eagle Ridge had suffered during the winter was placed under a magnifying glass. Then came Vivian's turn. She stood before the judge with her hands folded calmly. No rehearsed speech. No performance. Only truth. "Why did you marry Mr. Weston?" the attorney asked. A few people shifted in their seats. Vivian answered honestly. "Because I needed a place to live." A murmur moved through the room. The attorney smiled slightly, as if that answer helped his case. But Vivian continued. "And because 2 boys needed someone willing to stay." The smile disappeared. She spoke about homework at the kitchen table, about storms, about breakfast before school lessons, about small moments no court document could measure. When she finished, the room had grown quiet. Then Cole stood. The attorney questioned him about finances, about the ranch, about the practical arrangement that had started everything. Cole answered every question directly. Finally, the attorney asked the question everyone had been waiting for. "So your marriage began as an agreement?" "Yes." The attorney nodded. "And now?" Cole glanced toward Vivian. Only for a moment. But everyone in the room saw it. "Now she's part of my family." The room fell silent again. Then something unexpected happened. A chair scraped against the floor. Owen stood. The judge looked surprised. So did everyone else. "May I say something?" For a second, nobody moved. Then the judge nodded. Owen swallowed hard. His face had gone red, but he remained standing. "When she came to the ranch, I wanted her gone." A few quiet laughs drifted through the room. Owen ignored them. "I made things difficult." He glanced toward Vivian. "Real difficult." A faint smile touched her face. But she stayed. His voice strengthened. "When my father was missing in the storm, she came after me. The room listened. She found both of us." He took a breath. "Everyone keeps talking about what's best for me and Noah." His eyes moved toward Eleanor. But nobody asked us. The courtroom became perfectly still. She's the reason this place feels like home again. Owen sat down. No one spoke. Then another chair moved. Noah stood, smaller, nervous, but determined. The judge smiled gently. Would you like to say something too? Noah nodded. His fingers tightened around the edge of the bench. He looked toward Vivian, then toward the judge. Finally, he spoke. She's the only mother I remember. The words were quiet, yet somehow they filled the entire room. Eleanor closed her eyes. Victor lowered his gaze. Even the attorneys stopped writing. Nothing else needed to be said. Late that afternoon, the judge delivered his decision. The boys would remain with Cole Weston. No evidence suggested neglect. No evidence suggested instability. The family would stay together. Relief swept through the room, slowly at first, then all at once. Noah threw his arms around Vivian. Owen followed a moment later, pretending he wasn't emotional. Cole simply stood there, unable to speak. Eleanor remained seated for several seconds after everyone else began moving. Years of disappointment seemed to settle across her shoulders. When she finally approached them, her voice was softer than before. I loved my sister. I know, Vivian answered. Eleanor nodded once, then walked away. Outside, sunlight stretched across the streets of Cody. Winter had finally ended. Spring arrived gradually across Wyoming. Grass returned to the lower pastures. New calves appeared in the fields. The ranch accounts slowly improved. Life moved forward. One evening, several weeks later, Cole asked Vivian to ride with him. They followed a trail above the ranch, the same trail he had ridden countless times alone. At the top of the ridge stood a small grave beneath a cottonwood tree, the grave of his wife. The wind moved gently through the branches. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Cole reached into his coat pocket. A folded piece of paper appeared in his hand. Vivian recognized the handwriting immediately. The letter. The one she believed had been destroyed. Cole gave a small smile. I didn't burn all of it. His voice caught slightly. I couldn't. Carefully, he opened the preserved section. The paper trembled in his hands. He read the words silently, then aloud. If anything ever happens to me, promise me you'll keep living. The wind carried the sentence away across the valley. Cole lowered the paper. For several seconds, he simply stood there. Then tears filled his eyes. Not many, just enough. Years of guilt seemed to loosen their grip. When he finally turned toward Vivian, his expression looked different. Lighter. Freer. He reached into his pocket once more. Not for a ring. Not at first. For courage. I asked you to marry me once because I needed help. Vivian listened quietly. I asked for a mother for my boys. He stepped closer. But somewhere along the way, his voice softened. You became the best part of my life. Now he held out a small ring. Simple gold. Nothing extravagant. I don't want an agreement anymore. The evening sunlight glowed across the valley below them. I want a wife. His eyes never left hers. A real one. Vivian laughed through tears she hadn't realized were coming. For a practical man, Cole Weston. She shook her head. That was almost romantic. His answering smile was small, but real. For the first time. I love you. The words hung between them, steady, certain. She stepped forward. I love you too. Far below, two boys raced horses across the pasture. Their laughter drifted faintly through the spring air. Vivian slipped the ring onto her finger. Later, as the sun disappeared beyond the Wyoming hills, she stood on the porch of Eagle Ridge Ranch, the same porch she had first approached as a stranger. Cole stepped beside her. Neither spoke. The wind moved softly through the grass. Lights glowed inside the house. Home waited behind them. For the first time since leaving Stone Creek, Vivian did not wonder where she belonged. She already knew she was home. And maybe that's the part that stays with us long after the story ends. Not the courtroom, not the storm, not even the moment Cole finally found the words he had carried in silence for so many years. It's that quiet feeling of belonging. If you place yourself where Vivian once stood, alone in a small rented room, watching the future disappear one piece at a time, you can almost understand why that porch meant so much. It wasn't just a house. It wasn't even a ranch. It was the first place where she no longer had to wonder if she would be asked to leave. And if you've ever felt lost, overlooked, or uncertain about where you belong, then perhaps a part of this story belongs to you too. Because sometimes life doesn't give us the future we imagined. Sometimes it gives us something slower, something harder, something we never would have chosen at first. Yet through patience, loyalty, forgiveness, and simple everyday acts of showing up, those unexpected roads can lead us exactly where we were meant to be. Maybe that's what healing really looks like. Not a single moment, but 1,000 small choices to stay. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. What moment in Vivian and Cole's journey stayed with you the most? And if stories like this bring you comfort at the end of a long day, I hope you'll join us again. There are still many journeys waiting beyond the next horizon. Stories of love, second chances, courage, and the people who help us find our way home.